Bonjour à tous et merci d'être là, d'être fidèle au rendez-vous, d'assister à cette première conférence organisée par l'Institut Amadeus, plus particulièrement sur les questions de croissance. Je vais inviter tout de suite les deux participants à cette session qui est un dialogue, Monsieur Kostas Simitis, qui est un ancien Premier ministre grec. Monsieur Kostas Simitis a été Premier ministre dans son pays de 1996 à 2004. Il a été président et fondateur du PASOK, le Parti socialiste grec. Et puis Lucho Viñas de Sousa, qui est le directeur général et économiste en chef de Moody's, la célèbre agence de notation. Je vous remercie tous les deux d'être là. Vous appartenez l'un et l'autre à des professions qui ont été extrêmement décriées, critiquées, pour être à l'origine ou responsables de la situation actuelle, les hommes politiques et les agences de notation. Je ne dis pas ça pour vous provoquer d'emblée, mais je suis sûr qu'aujourd'hui, vous apporterez énormément de solutions à la situation que nous traversons, puisque l'Institut Amadeus nous demande de nous interroger sur, au fond, le cœur du problème. Nous allons nous focaliser pendant cette session sur la question, évidemment, de la croissance en Europe et de son élément clé, qui est celui de la compétitivité. Et je voudrais remercier d'abord M. Kostas Simitis d'avoir accepté je sais que vous avez préparé un discours que vous aviez à cœur de délivrer aujourd'hui. Vous avez accepté de jouer le jeu, au fond, de cette session, qui est celle d'un dialogue. Voilà, pour qu'il y ait un échange vivant et de répondre éventuellement à des questions par la suite. Juste en deux mots, sans vouloir être trop long, donner quelques éléments. Tout le monde est bien conscient de la gravité de la situation en Europe, mais pour refixer à nouveau les choses, la zone Europe, la zone euro va être la seule zone finalement qui connaîtra la récession cette année, une récession évaluée à moins 0,2%, peut-être sera davantage, avec un taux de chômage qui avoisine les 12%. Et pour évoquer la question de la compétitivité, particulièrement de la compétitivité et des écarts de compétitivité à l'intérieur de cette zone, parce qu'une des grandes questions, et notamment une des questions que vous vouliez aborder, est celle des rapports entre les pays du nord de l'Europe et celle du sud, pour ne pas parler tout de suite de la Grèce. Entre 2000 et 2012, ces 12 dernières années, le commerce de la France avec la Chine est passé de 2,5 à 15 milliards d'euros. Mais dans le même temps, le commerce de l'Allemagne avec la Chine est passé de 7 milliards à 65 milliards d'euros. Et ce qui explique par exemple que la part de la France dans le commerce mondial est passée de 7,8% en 1995 à seulement 6,3%, alors que dans le même temps, la part de l'Allemagne dans le commerce mondial passait de 13% à 16%. Donc on voit qu'il y a des situations extrêmement contrastées qui s'expliquent, évidemment, et que vous allez expliquer pendant cette session. Les choses telles que nous les voyons sont devenues extrêmement concrètes et je ne peux pas éviter de commencer par vous poser une question qui est une question d'actualité, mais qui est tellement brûlante et tellement au cœur de notre réflexion en même temps aussi, que j'ai envie de connaître votre avis là-dessus. On voit que les peuples tentent péniblement de se réapproprier une part de leur pouvoir d'action sur leur destin, sur leur avenir. Et je voudrais savoir ce que vous, Monsieur le Premier ministre, vous pensez de la réaction aujourd'hui du peuple chypriote, mais de la classe politique chypriote aussi, qui refuse, par exemple, la dernière trouvaille, si je puis dire, de la Commission européenne, qui a été la proposition de taxer les dépôts bancaires, dont on connaît encore mal les modalités exactes, mais dont on voit la philosophie. Taxer les dépôts bancaires dans un pays où effectivement ils atteignent 4 ou 5 fois, je crois, la richesse nationale produite chaque année. Qu'est-ce que vous avez pensé de cette réaction? Est-ce que vous pensez que c'est une réaction saine? Et quel type de réflexion ça vous procure?
Alors, j'aimerais d'abord noter, parce que vous avez dit que le peuple maintenant essaie de retrouver leur souveraineté, ou à peu près vous avez mentionné ce problème. Il ne faut pas oublier que depuis la création de l'Union européenne, ce que les peuples d'Europe ont fait, ils ont décidé de restreindre leur souveraineté pour qu'ensemble, ils créent un nouveau type de coopération et achèvent, par exemple, le growth que nous parlons d'une autre manière que celle que le pays suivait avant la monnaie unique ou la création de l'Union européenne. Alors la souveraineté en Europe, c'est tout à fait autre chose que la souveraineté autre part. La souveraineté n'existe pas de la même manière parce qu'il y a plusieurs questions qui sont très très importantes, qui ne sont plus décidées par les États, mais elles sont décidées par l'Union, avec les États. Mais la décision est prise par l'Union européenne. Alors, le problème le plus connu, c'est le problème monétaire. Il y a l'euro, alors les questions de l'euro sont discutées par tous les États européens, et la Commission, le Conseil européen, la Banque européenne, qui décide des questions de l'euro. Alors on ne peut pas dire nous n'avons pas la souveraineté monétaire, il faut changer cela, parce que si on change cela, il n'y a plus d'euro, il n'y a plus d'union monétaire. Alors, le problème de l'Europe, je dirais, c'est qu'on n'a pas encore décidé de restreindre encore la souveraineté pour avoir une politique économique commune. La grande discussion en Europe en ce moment, elle a commencé, mais elle n'a pas encore progressé. C'est la discussion concernant le gouvernement économique, l'economic governance, comme on dit. Et une des raisons que l'Europe se trouve maintenant en crise, où il y a ce problème avec le Chypre, la Grèce, l'Italie, l'Espagne, c'est qu'on n'a pas pu, malgré beaucoup d'efforts, arriver à un résultat en ce qui concerne certains points très importants de la gouvernance économique. Par exemple, l'union bancaire, on a parlé, on a pris des décisions. L'union bancaire n'existe pas encore. L'union bancaire se fera dans le mois ou dans l'année à venir, car elle est nécessaire pour pouvoir contrôler les banques de toute l'Europe. Alors, une autre question très importante aussi, qui doit être résolue, parce que c'est le problème aussi de Chypre, mais surtout du sud de l'Europe, c'est le problème de la différence de compétitivité entre l'Europe du Nord et l'Europe du Sud. On ne peut pas dire que c'est les pays du Sud qui n'ont pas suivi l'économie politique, la politique économique qu'il faudrait suivre, et c'est pour cela qu'ils se trouvent en crise. C'est vrai dans certains points, mais ce n'est pas vrai dans le cadre de toute l'Union européenne, parce que ce n'est pas vrai, parce qu'il y a cette différence de compétitivité. Vous mentionnez les chiffres entre du commerce de la France avec la Chine ou de l'Allemagne avec la Chine, mais vous ne mentionnez pas les chiffres de la différence entre du rapport commercial entre l'Allemagne et la Grèce, la France et la Grèce, l'Allemagne et l'Italie ou l'Allemagne et l'Espagne.
On va y venir, mais
il faut montrer que le tout, excusez-moi, il faut montrer que le tout a des problèmes.
Bien sûr.
Et ce n'est pas des problèmes de Chypre ou de la Grèce seulement, c'est aussi un problème, mais c'est un problème de l'ensemble qui ne s'est pas encore décidé de faire les démarches nécessaires pour pouvoir résoudre le problème.
Je vais être encore plus précis, reposer ma question pour la remettre plus dans le cœur de notre débat. On apprend très tôt dans les universités, c'est ce que j'ai appris en tout cas, qu'il n'y a pas de croissance, il n'y a pas de compétitivité s'il n'y a pas de confiance. D'accord ?
Oui, c'est juste.
cette idée de s'attaquer à l'argent des déposants, qu'on considérait être une sorte de tabou jusqu'à présent, hein, absolu, est-ce que ça n'est pas une très mauvaise idée, justement, dans cette perspective-là? C'est-à-dire, comment peut-il y avoir confiance, comment peut-il y avoir des investissements si, aujourd'hui, ça commence à Chypre, mais malgré toutes les garanties qu'on nous donne, que les hommes politiques nous donnent, on peut toujours penser que ça arrivera demain dans tel ou tel autre pays de l'Union européenne. C'est quand même peut-être un signal très négatif donné aux investisseurs, non?
Oui. Vous savez qu'après la décision de l'Eurogroupe, il y a une grande discussion en Europe. Il y a beaucoup de gens qui ont dit que c'était une très mauvaise idée. Il ne fallait pas demander une taxation, c'est une taxation de 10% sur l'argent que les épargnants avaient aux banques. Mais quand même, ce n'est pas quelqu'un qui ne se connaissait pas qui a pris cette décision. C'est l'Eurogroupe qui a pris cette décision. La Commission était d'accord. La Banque centrale européenne était d'accord. Et l'International Monetary Fund était d'accord.
Pour autant, est-ce que c'était une bonne idée?
Pardon?
Pour autant, était-ce une bonne idée? Était-ce une bonne idée pour autant?
Mais moi, je dis, si ça s'échoue, ce n'est pas une bonne idée, mais si ça réussit, c'est une bonne idée. Parce qu'il faut quand même sauver Chypre, n'est-ce pas? Alors, on a proposé quelque chose, les Chypriotes ne sont pas d'accord, peut-être ils ont raison, mais en tout cas, en ce moment, personne ne sait s'il y aura un résultat positif ou non. Alors, je serais très téméraire si je disais que c'était une bonne idée ou ce n'était pas une bonne idée, j'attendrai le résultat.
D'accord. Monsieur Vignals de Souza, I'd like to have your thought on this same question, on the impact on confidence of this decision on Cyprus.
Allow me to start by thanking the organizers for the invitation. I would like to try to start by having a slightly different reading on what was the decision process that led to the decision taken in the summit. Our reading is that the original proposal that came from the Commission side was considerably different in terms of the way that the distribution of costs among depositors was to be shared. Namely, the original proposal was a concentration of the levy tax above the 100,000 euros limit. That because of several obvious implications. First, a levy that was charged only above 100,000 would be a quote-unquote legal one because it wouldn't touch the deposit guarantee that we have across the Union. Secondly, that would have the implication of essentially transferring the costs of the tax, because it is a tax in the end of the day, to non-resident depositors in the European Union.
In other terms, making the Russians pay for the origin of the crisis.
Russians, Ukrainians, whoever is a non-resident. I am a non-discriminatory component on this. Everybody that is not a EU citizen is a non-resident, or a Euro area citizen, to be more precise. It was, according to the best descriptions that we have of the political process, a decision of the Cypriot government to extend the costs of the adjustment to its whole population. The reasoning that they applied to this decision seems to have been the following. A notion that a particular type of growth model for the financial system in Greece, Cyprus, I think, was to be preserved even at the costs of implying significant losses of its own domestic population. In the end of the day, that was a decision of the Cypriot government, which the summit approved because it was a decision of the member state in question. When push came to shove and they decided to try to pass this via their own parliament, they failed because politicians realized that they were implying a significant loss on their own citizens, essentially to preserve the wealth of non-residents. That on our reading, and I think on the reading of the Eurogroup, the reading of the European Central Bank, the reading of the European Commission, is essentially the matter that led to the collapse of the discussions. The fact that the Cypriot government itself made a decision to preserve a certain amount of wealth in a certain group of depositors and transferring the cost of adjustment to its own population. Now, if you ask me if this was first a sustainable or correct decision, the position that I would have to convey is the following. It was necessary to find an amount to bridge the gap on the resources that were provided by the Union. This had to come from somewhere. The only credible component of the resources that Cyprus has, because there is a very little amount to privatize, the banks have little amounts of outstanding debts, was depositors. A levy on depositors was necessarily the most logical choice. The way that this was implemented by the Cypriot government seems to have been, at the best, ill-advised. So, trying to resume what I have been saying. It was necessary to find resources. There was one single obvious candidate, given the amount of resources, depositors. And the way to try to do this in a way in which the Cypriot population would not have been excessively hit was to concentrate it on non-residents. It was a choice of the Cypriot government not to do so.
And what about the holders of the Cypriot debt? We never talk about that. Is it a taboo too? Why not making on the table that the holders of the debt can renounce part of it, like it was done with Greece?
Incidentally, that's exactly one of the reasons in which the choice was made to bridge the financing gap in terms of this levy on depositors. Otherwise, if the package had been done in terms of a fully financed loan package to the Cypriot Republic, effectively this becomes your debt. You have to repay this at some point. It was exactly a question of the fiscal sustainability of the adjustment, learning on the lessons that we learned out of the program in Greece, that it was decided that this time the profile of the debt would be much more sustainable. The initial package would have implied that the stock of debt in Cyprus would never have risen above 100%, because the amount of additional debt would have been limited. This is roughly half of what you would have if you have implied an adjustment similar to the one in Greece. The choice was exactly to make the fiscal position of the Cypriot government more sustainable than what we had in other adjustment processes in the euro area. It was exactly for that, to try to reduce the amount of debt that would be incurred by the Cypriot government.
I agree with what was said, because the union, shall we say, the commission, etc., wanted to have a solution that would make things easier to Cyprus, what you said. And really, this solution is making things easier to Cyprus. But in any case, I wanted to make a remark. The Cyprus problem and the Greek problem and the Italian problem, I would say, but the Cyprus and the Greek are problems that are problems, part of a bigger problem. And we should not look at these minor problems, or not minor, but in any case, results of the bigger problem. We must also concentrate, and that's the most important, on the bigger problem, the difference between the North and the South, the difference of competitivity, the possibility, the way the union functions, and the union does not function in a way to ensure stability in the whole of Europe and not growth in the whole of Europe. Because I'm Greek, you mentioned Cyprus, you mentioned Greek, but you did not mention Spain, you did not mention Portugal, you did not mention Ireland, you did not mention Italy. But also in these countries, there was a problem.
As a proud Portuguese citizen, I am gladly able to speak about Portugal if you wish. You are absolutely correct. We have clearly a question on the differential of competitiveness between quote-unquote core and periphery Europe. I would make two remarks in relation to this position, is that I don't exempt our national governments of responsibility on that. I think it was clear for the past 10 years that we had serious competitiveness problems in the Portuguese Republic. At least 3 different Portuguese governments did not address that, and it was a choice, because that was obvious, right? I don't exempt my own governments for taking wrong decisions or not taking decisions at all. This said, one thing that we have been observing since at least 2008 is a very significant reduction of the competitiveness gap that you have between certain parts of the euro area periphery and the core. If you look at what has happened in Ireland, Ireland has almost fully eliminated the competitiveness losses that they have since 2008.
How?
There are 2 different ways in which you can do that, assuming that, as we all are, that we are ruling out a competitive devaluation. You can essentially reduce costs to enterprises when they engage in their economic activities, or you can reduce the costs of production factors, labor, whatever. Typically what has happened is a combination of the 2 with a concentration on the reduction of the costs of production factors, labor, right? Unit labor costs, the cost of your labor in terms of the unit of output that you have produced have increased very much across the euro area periphery, far and above what you had in core, quote-unquote, countries like the Federal Republic of Germany. Typically what has happened is that you have reduced the costs of labor, but not only that, you have opened up markets to reduce costs of factors like electricity, right? Which were typically much more expensive in Southern Europe than in the core because of market configuration questions. You have reduced the costs of engaging in business. I have the old joke that I used to tell people that if you had a pharmacy in Lisbon, right, you actually had monopoly power because you had the title to have a pharmacy in a whole neighborhood. You would leave that to your children in your will because it was an asset, something that enabled you to derive effectively monopoly rents from that. You don't have that anymore in Portugal because now you have a more free market in terms of the production of licenses for pharmacies. That also makes you producing, you engaging in business, less expensive than before. So in the periphery, you had a combination of those other types of cost reductions, but a very large component of the reduction of cost of labor.
And you didn't mention public spendings.
That's part of the adjustment process when you, for instance, you want to reduce pension costs or want to reduce unemployment costs, right? This effectively means that you are making labor less expensive. At the same time, you are trying to reduce the fiscal imbalances that you are sovereign.
But hasn't Greece
Minister Simitis wanted to say something. Please.
I agree more or less with what you said. I agree more or less with what you said, but I want to make another point. The policy of the European Union was we have the same principles and apply the same principles to all of the countries. You spoke about the labor costs, for example. You spoke rightly also about the structural changes that are necessary. But all the countries are not the same. There are differences in the countries. So you cannot ask Greece to do the same effort in the same time as, for example, Ireland, because Ireland was very competitive. It had taxes of, I don't remember, 10%, 5%. In Greece, the taxes are about 25%. Ireland
business tax, you mean? Business tax.
The business tax, yes, the business taxes. Or Ireland was very competitive in another sense. There were many American companies going to Ireland because the Irish speak English. That's very easy for them to work there. They can't come to Greece because not only in Germany or in England they don't speak Greek, but in any case, the social organization in a southern country is not the same as it in other southern countries. Italy has a far more better public administration that, for example, Greece has. So each country needs time to adapt. And in the European Union, they took not into consideration this necessity to give time. They thought, in the first program, they said Greece must be 3 years, must achieve the aims in 3 years. But now they're speaking about 6 years. And I'm not sure if they don't change this. And they show that this is not possible to have the same policy. And we must take this into consideration.
Is it going too fast for Greece? Greece has done considerable amount of sacrifices, and they've done both of the 2 points you made, and we still don't see the end of the tunnel.
I believe that we all agree that more flexibility, more liberalization is something that is positive and actually necessary for all across the periphery. We agree on that. The question, therefore, is time frame and instruments, right? Trying to compare the adjustment programs that we currently have across the euro area periphery, one thing that strikes you when you start examining them is how heterogeneous they actually are. You have programs that essentially are sectoral adjustment programs, and I don't only mean Spain, I mean Ireland. When you actually look at the Irish program, essentially it's a banking sector adjustment program. They had very little to do in terms of flexibilization of labor markets. You look at the Portuguese program, essentially, because there was no significant overhang on the banking sector, is a structural reform adjustment program because you had rigidities in labor markets, in factor markets, etc. The very fact that the Hellenic Republic has actually a second program implies that by definition the time frames that have been allocated to the Hellenic sovereign to deliver the agreed results now are much longer than before. That implies that the providers of the external support, the Troika, adjusted the targets by providing you with more time, more resources, and effectively flexibilizing all the targets. It's not apparent from the experience of the other adjustment programs that we had that this was something that was necessary, neither for Ireland nor for Portugal. As far, if you just allow me to finish, as far as we can observe in terms of the implementation of the Irish program, in terms of the implementation of the Portuguese program, they were on track and on time. They were delivering exactly what was agreed and on the time frame that was agreed. You can, of course, make the case that the level of distortions in Greece was much higher than on those other two, which I find intuitively believable. But that, by definition, has been taken care by the fact that now you have a much larger amount of resources and a much longer period of time to deliver the agreed targets than before. In other terms, it doesn't seem to me correct to describe the programs as being homogeneous. Quite to the contrary. It seems apparent to me that they recognize the differences of structure, needs, and rigidities that you had between the different countries in the periphery.
First, I want to ask you, perhaps I'm wrong, but so far as I know, they have given to Portugal more time. They changed the program and gave more time. And I think this was done twice. So it was not the first program that was applied that is being applied now. They changed it. I'm wrong?
No. You are correct on the sense that, but we, just as a small information advice for transparency's sake, I'm a former official from the European Commission and I actually worked in some of those program designs. The way that a program works, it goes like the following. You have quarterly assessment benchmarks, right? You verify what is happening in terms of adjustment, and the programs internally have flexibility to allow you to switch between targets if you think that you have unforeseen shocks, or if you think that, for instance, you are over or underperforming in other areas. For instance, in Ireland, Ireland had a non-usage of amount of resources that were allocated for bank capitalization. The program decided that the Irish government could do that to reduce their own needs of fiscal adjustment, right? In the case of Portugal, you mentioned two situations in which, because the downturn ended up being much more pronounced than was on the program, that the need for adjustment implied that they would have to do much more in a recessionary period than before. The underlying reason of why they extended targets for Portugal is because the economic contraction was much greater. And therefore, they made a judgment call that the Portuguese sovereign needed more time to adjust. But that was inbuilt into the program. It was not something that was added later as a sort of a, let's be nice to them.
I want to make a remark. You said now that there was a contraction in Portugal that was not expected. I don't know exactly how much the contraction was, but you should not forget that in Greece there was an enormous contraction. In Greece, first I want to say so that everybody understands, the Greek program, the first Greek program, was prepared and applied from May 2010. The first Portuguese program was made and applied 5 months later, 6 months later.
A little more.
More. So it was applied later, and when it was applied later, they knew already that the Greek program they had made was wrong. And it was wrong because they said that there would be a contraction from the year 2010 to the year 2012 of 8.6%. And the contraction from the year 2010 until the year, then they changed it. And they said there will be a contraction of nearly 12%. And the contraction until the year 2013, will be 30%, not 8, not 12, but 30%. So they made a mistake, and they made a big mistake. And because of this big mistake, the whole situation in Greece went from worse to worse, to more worse, and so on. I'm saying this in order to show that, because that's my opinion, when then they took the decision concerning Greece in May 2010, they thought that this is a problem of this country. It's not a general problem. And so we have to find out immediately a solution, and that is to be applied now. And if it does not work after 5 or 6 or 7 months, then we look again at the problem.
You're right that it's not only a Greek problem or a South European or periphery problem in Europe. We'll come to that later, but I have a question for you. I said that Greece has done considerable sacrifices in terms of competitive...
Just a moment, I want to finish in order to say that the European Union began to apply this program in Greece without knowing exactly how it will function and what will be the result. When Portugal came and when Ireland came, they knew better and did something else. And it was more easier to apply than in the first case.
Okay, just to refocus a little bit on competitivity and growth, after all these sacrifices in terms of cost of competitivity, let's say costs, wage costs, pension costs that have been cut dramatically in Greece, do you think that Greece has become a more competitive country?
Not at all. Up to now, not at all. And there was a discussion before here about the Maghreb, the African countries, and I want to stress also what was said. they used in the previous discussion the word security. I do not agree with the word security. I would say there must be confidence. If you want investments, the investors must have confidence. And who has now confidence in a country like Greece? Or perhaps they have more confidence in Portugal, but I would say in any case, they have not the same confidence in Portugal that they have in Germany. So those investors who want to invest, they will think twice if they go to the south, and they prefer to go to the north. So first thing to do is, in order to have investments, is to try to have more confidence in the countries that have to adapt.
It's a long way, no? What do you think, Lucio?
Allow me to just start by saying one thing. I cannot come across here as someone that is defending European Union programs because I am the chief economist of Moody's, right? That's my hat during this discussion. At the most, I can claim that I have feelings as a Portuguese citizen and taxpayer. On your question, and I will use the opportunity to mention some work that we have done in Moody's in terms of the measurement of the adjustment that we have observed across the periphery, including, I might say, Greece, who incidentally has gained competitiveness and actually has had a significant improvement of its external position. What you roughly observe across the periphery is that of the external imbalances that you had before, the current account deficits that in some of those countries, my own for instance, were above 10% of GDP, have been more than halved since 2008. You have also a significant reduction of the loss of competitiveness that you had observed in those economies since the 2000s, incidentally also in Greece. In terms of the benchmarking of the adjustment process, if we were to compare with other European adjustment crises, people don't remember that, but if you go back to Scandinavia, core Northern Europe, in the beginning of the 90s, you had two crises which in some ways were strikingly similar to what we're observing now in the periphery, in Sweden and in Finland. You had the overextension of financial sectors. You had the overvalued fixed exchange rate. You had increased external imbalances in those two countries. If you benchmark the adjustment that Sweden and Finland had after their own crisis, as an example, to what we have observed so far in the euro area periphery, and if you were to push me against the wall, and I say that before the shock of the Cypriot situation, I would more or less say that between half and 2/3 of the adjustment had been done. Given that the adjustment started roughly 3 years ago, if we assume that we are mid of the way, that would be 3 more years of adjustment. If we take the view that 2/3 of the adjustment have elapsed, we are looking at something like 2 years more of adjustment. Benchmarking the current experience on this previous European crisis experience, the Nordics in the early 1990s.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you said at last. The benchmark?
Benchmarking the current experience of the euro area periphery to those Nordic crises that we had in the beginning of the 1990s, between 91 and 92 in Sweden and in Finland. The years of the crisis, not the recovery period.
That's a very interesting remark, but I'm coming back to what I said before. Sweden, Finland were very developed countries, are very developed countries. Competitiveness does not mean only low labor costs. It means also quality. It means a good administration. It means a good tax system. So it means if a developed industry is existing, more innovation. Sweden had very good tax system, a good public administration, good quality in products, well-known products in the whole of the world. So what they had to do, and they did it in a very good way, in 3 or 4 years, if I remember, as you said, was to adapt the bank system. And the bank system was private, it went to the state took over the banks, and then the banks were sold again to private persons. This would not function in the south, and I don't think you can compare the south to the north, because in the south you have not the same prerequisites.
Allow me just to make one remark. This really makes me somewhat uncomfortable, because you seem to be assuming that Northern Europeans are somewhat structurally always superior to us, poor Southern Europeans, and I resist strongly this sort of a conclusion. The Swedes didn't magically become competitive with effective governments. They build that throughout policy choices. Policy choices is something that any government can do. Institutions are just the accumulation of the policy choices that you make today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. We can all do that. We can all be Swedes in the end of the day. It's a question of policy choices.
So it's a